You are listening to the Julie Parker Practice Success Podcast, where you discover management insights and strategies for your successful dental practice. There are also interviews with key people in the industry who have advice and services to help you and your team achieve great success. Welcome to this episode of the Julie Parker Practice Success Podcast. Today, I want to dive into something that I think can make an enormous difference in your world. And we're talking specifically about your dental practice world. And it's something that I've recently delved more into in my work and in the things that we're doing with clients as well. And it certainly has made a substantial difference. The topic is resourcefulness. Now, I want you to think back to the last time you faced some real challenges in your practice. Maybe you were struggling to find the right team member for a role, or perhaps some new patient numbers had dropped off and you wanted to get more new patients coming into the practice. Maybe you started concentrating on your Google reviews and you wanted more Google reviews coming in. I want to ask you, what did you do? What was your approach? If you're like most of us, you probably went to your old usual playbook. So, for example, when you were attracting a new team member, you posted a job ad on Seek and Indeed, and then started reading through the applications. Hopefully you were satisfied enough with the people that were applying, and that's who you've got to choose from. If you were looking for more new patients, maybe you just went back to your SEO and Google Ads company and just ran another marketing campaign. And if you were looking for more Google reviews, maybe you suggested to your team members, this is what we have to focus on, so can we all start asking our patients who are happy with us for a Google review? Am I right? These are the sort of go-to places that we have as actions when we want to tackle a particular challenge in the practice. And there's actually nothing wrong with that. And there's nothing wrong with those actions because we keep doing them because to some degree they have worked in the past. But when I've been looking at resourcefulness within the Being framework, and for those that aren't aware, the Being framework is something that I've been studying for the past year now, I think, and also a practitioner in it. But going into resourcefulness and really contemplating and then taking steps into action to make sure that I am being more resourceful, it's really transformed some of the projects that I've been working on. And I suggest it may transform the way your practice faces any of these challenges. So within the Being framework, resourcefulness is about living life from a viewpoint of abundance and being effective at finding or creating new ways of doing things. Because the ways we do things normally is we do what we already know. But being resourceful is kind of looking beyond that, really looking outside the box, beyond all the conventional actions that we take, and find the solutions, stay in that discovery space long enough to find solutions that would not normally jump out at us. Let me give you a real-world example. We all remember the pandemic. All the practices shut down, and I was doing some work with a few practices in the very early stages of what later became the Academy. During those shutdowns here in Melbourne, some practices shut down and then waited, feeling stuck because their usual way of operating really wasn't available to them anymore. And so they sat back and waited for the government to say, okay, now you can open up, and then you'll know what actions to take again because they're the usual actions you always took when you were in the general operation of your practice. But there were other practices that got wildly creative. For example, there was one practice that started doing virtual consults for their emergencies and patients that were in active perio treatment, and those who were mid root canal treatment, they were actually setting up virtual consultations with them, maintaining the connection, maintaining the relationship, and being of enormous support for them. And then there was another practice that decided to create a whole bunch of educational videos on how to brush, how to floss, how to use a water pick, why certain foods that cause staining, and all this range of videos that they were then sharing with their patient base. It built massive goodwill. All of these ideas came from a more creative headspace. They didn't come from the kind of Groundhog Day approach to our working life. They came from what happens if we took a really creative approach? And let's see what kind of ideas we come up with. Now, on that particular point, Ortal Green, the magnificent author of Think Unique, which is raising a successful, innovative child. I've had her on the podcast as a guest in the past, and her book is filled with Post-it notes that I'm looking through and recognising all of these, so I can be reminded about all the wonderful things in that book. But one of the things that she talks about when we start wanting to think creatively as a group, because what normally happens, we get into a group gathering and someone comes up with different ideas, and you'll always have other people telling us why that won't work and why that won't work and why that won't work. Creative mindset is a different mindset to the side of the brain that starts figuring out whether things are possible or not. And so her advice is have an agreement with the group that we're just going to be using our creative minds for the first part of this exercise. That's where all these wonderful ideas will come out. We'll write them all down. And then as a separate project, we'll go in to each of those ideas and determine whether they are viable moving forward or not. And so when you think about a whole bunch of team members that had time, they were on an online session during the pandemic, what a terrific way of spending some time of thinking, if there was no limit, what are all the things that we could possibly do during this time to, rather than just put ourselves on hold like a majority of the practices were, what could we do to actually use it as an opportunity to strengthen relationships, do some marketing, get some great word of mouth happening, and be in our patients' minds. So one of the common issues at the moment, of course, is recruitment. We are experiencing and hearing about all the time how difficult recruitment in the dental space is at the moment. It's been that way since COVID hit, and it hasn't really relieved. And so we go down the path of having conversations with practice owners. What is going to be your strategy? Yes, we'll post on Seek, we'll post on Indeed, and hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll get some great applications coming through. But if we were to think more creatively and resourcefully and come up with a whole bunch of different ideas, what would the team come up with? Some of the ones that we've come up with in the past is putting a sign in your waiting room. So your current patients who are moving through the practice can see that you're looking for a new dental assistant, for example, and that you're happy to provide a traineeship. You could have a page on your website that's just all about recruitment and has interviews, video footage of your current team members, why they love their roles that they work in within your practice, why they love working at your practice. You could go on to social media, into the local community Facebook group, and do a song and dance about how wonderful it is to work in the dental profession. So you can start getting some early school leavers or people looking for work, but they might be looking more into hospitality or caregiving rather than dental. It hasn't occurred to them yet. And I certainly remember back when I was an early school leaver and I needed to find a job. It was amazing. My mum, who was so passionate about me not sitting around the house all day, now she became super resourceful in trying to figure out how she was going to get me a job. And so when you're in the Facebook community groups, it might be the parents that you're talking to, not necessarily the person that will end up working in your practice. You can also develop relationships with the local high schools and TAFEs as well and find out ways of getting interested parties through the practice to see if you get anybody coming through that they go, yeah, this is for me. I think I want to move down this path. If you've got any existing patients who are young and the last time they were in, you were having a discussion with them about what they were going to study at uni, and they're like, I'm going to put that off for a couple of years. But you know them as a human being, you know that they've come from a lovely family and they're always polite when they come in. Give them a chance. All of a sudden, the number of ideas that we've got on actions that we can take explodes when we become super, super resourceful. Remember, we're coming from a space of abundance when we are being super resourceful. And we're coming from a space of scarcity, challenge, limitations, when we just rely on the same one or two actions that we always have in the past, quite possibly. With the Google reviews, throw the idea out to your whole team at your next staff meeting. Encourage them to think creatively. As they're delivering ideas, don't batter them away. Add them all to a list. And just see, as an exercise, how creative your team can get when it comes to finding possible solutions, possible actions that we could take as a practice to help us be more successful. Marketing is a classic example of the difference between limited thinking and resourceful thinking. We need to have more new patients. Let's do a marketing campaign. Let's get online with our online presence, SEO, Google ad person company. Let's throw the problem at them. However, when you consider, and we've actually got a lunch and learn on this app, this specific topic within the academy, there's 52 listed ways in the academy on how to market your practice, but a whole bunch of them don't cost anything or very little amount of money. There's a whole bunch of ways of doing more grassroots kind of advertising campaigns, which is a much, much lower spend for the practice than the digital stuff and ad spend on Facebook and socials and Google, etc. And when you start to come up with some ideas, all of a sudden the brain starts functioning and churning out more and more and more. The big question that we need to ask ourselves when we're trying to tap into that more resourceful side of our brain is asking ourselves, what options do we have that we haven't yet considered? What resources are right there in front of us that we're not even seeing to be able to utilise? Who out there could I ask for help? I mean, look at the Facebook forums. Jump online. What grassroots advertising do you guys do? How do you guys get your Google reviews numbers up? Nowadays, you can jump on to ChatGPT and have a conversation. I want to become super resourceful in my management of how to recruit fantastic team members. I need to broaden my pool of people that I'm trying to attract. For example, this is a wonderful example of the different way of thinking about a particular challenge. The pool of dental assistants that we're trying to recruit from has shrunk. And it doesn't look like it's getting any bigger. What if we started really appealing to young men to come in and be dental assistants? Maybe the wording of our ads needs to be different. Maybe our videos on what is involved in being a dental assistant needs to change so it includes men in those videos as well. A lot of what people presume dental assistants do all day is what they've seen when they've turned up to their dental appointment times. However, the role is quite varied and has a lot of interesting elements in it. And so just opening your doors up in a very obvious way that this is a wonderful profession for women or men, all of a sudden you might be doubling the reach that you get. So it is about thinking about these sort of situations differently. When you start to feel yourself get that tension in your chest, or we have to look for another staff member again, I need more new patients, and you get that tension in your chest that we've tried things in the past and they just don't work as well as I'd hoped, then shift gear and go, no, that was the way old me used to approach these sort of situations. I'm going with a new me way of approaching this. I'm going with a more resourceful way. And while I'm training myself into thinking more resourcefully, I'm going to start tapping into additional team members, other people within my community, within the dental community, what they're doing. I'm going to be jumping online with ChatGPT, give me 50 different ways to do this thing, so we can actually start to train our brains into thinking more creatively. I'll share another story with you. I was working with a practice. They had the problem of patients cancelling late, a common problem that a lot of practices experience. We went down the path of making sure the confirmation messaging, the number of times we were confirming, the cadence of those communications, was that all true and correct? Setting the expectations on the appointment time for the patient, making sure they saw true value in that appointment time itself, was that all happening? And then I came across a hairdresser that was doing something interesting, and I thought, I wonder if that could be applied to dental. And so this practice implemented that. And this process was that when a day arrived with gaps in the appointment schedule, the team would jump onto their social media pages and put out, we've got a slot that has come available at 2 o'clock this afternoon. If anybody would like to jump into that spot, you could get a standby reward of $50 off your next service. And so they would have people that were due for their general checkup and clean, hadn't actually booked in as yet, or they had a filling planned and they haven't made their appointment time as yet. They see that on your social page and they think, oh gosh, that time does suit me, I can make that work, and I get $50 off my treatment. Why wouldn't I just jump on that? And they had then implemented a system that was truly creative, different from what everyone else was doing, not normally what they would do, and they had a full schedule, still profitable. So this is a wonderful exercise to put into play next time that your practice is facing any kind of challenge or thing you want to get done. Consider, obviously, straight away the go-to places, the go-to actions that you would normally do. But then sit with the thought, think creatively, and add another 10 possible solutions to that challenge. Another 10 things that you could be doing that you would not normally do that could provide a fantastic solution to that issue. And just sit with it until you've got those 10, is what I want to say. If you're finding it hard to get to the 10, get other people on board with your thinking and get to a list of 10 together. You really will be quite surprised at what emerges when you stop limiting yourself to just your regular everyday thinking. Because here's the truth. You already have more resources than you actually realise, more skills in your team, more goodwill with your patients, more creative capacity, more options than you've ever been accessing in the past, and you just want to get to the point where all that opens up for you. And then it just becomes a way that you think. You do it a few times, you get the better outcomes, and all of a sudden that's just the new pathway of thought when you are coming up with ideas on what next actions that you could take to overcome a particular thing at your practice. So I'll leave that with you. I wish you luck in your resourceful thinking. See you next time.
If you enjoyed this podcast, then I encourage you to head over to Ameena and my website, dentalbusinessmastery.com.au. You will find all the information that you need if you would like to gain our assistance in helping you and your team achieve great success. If you would like to find out more, you can also email us directly at info@dentalbusinessmastery.com.au. Thanks so much for listening.